Hello everyone, welcome to the Green Man channel. Hope you're all good and well and ready for a Saturday premiere. And moreover, that you're ready for another horror films first watch tier list on the channel. This is where I rate different horror films into different tiers. So if you're familiar with how this works, you probably don't need an explanation, but I'll very quickly, go through what tier lists are all about. So everything in S tier, everything in the top tier is everything that I enjoy the most, everything that I rate the best, basically, out of all these films. Everything that will go into D tier is everything I like the least. All the films I consider the worst, basically. And A are the very good ones, B are the kind of mid, okay ones, C are the not so good ones, but not terrible films. So, in keeping with how these other episodes of this series have worked, I thought I'd better come up with another theme for this. And I actually struggled to think of a theme this time. So I thought, well, what about A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh, since we've got Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey in the mix for going into a tier? Let's go with a Winnie the Pooh theme. So just have a bit of fun, really, and nothing more than that, because we're going to talk about the Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey film later on. It's coming up. So S is going to be what's really great for Winnie the Pooh, the Land of Milk and Honey. That's going to be the first tier, everything I like the best. Next up, I think this is everything that I consider very, very good. So not quite amazing, not quite superb, but very, very good. So I'm going to call this Tigger Energy. Tigger has good vibes. Let's call that Tigger Energy. B, I'm going to call Blustery Day. I don't know. I was trying to think of something earlier that I would put as okay or neutral for Winnie the Pooh, and Blustery Day just came to mind, so I'm not sure that makes sense, but never mind. Let's move on to C tier, which is not very good, so I'm going to call this a Heffalump. These are the Heffalump kind of films. Not terrible, but not very good. And D is just going to be, simply put, it's just poo. All right, let's get on with this tier list then. So 9 films in the mix here. And we're going to start here with Zach Cregger's Barbarian, which stars Georgina Campbell, Justin Long, and Bill Skarsgård. And this is a very, very good film, a very strong film to start with on this tier list. Well directed, interesting structure where you start with 2 main characters. And actually, for half of the film, you mostly follow those 2 main characters in this kind of, in this house where there's strange goings on in the basement. Then they introduce another main character about halfway through the film. But the way they draw together the 2 stories, or those stories of those different characters, is very, very clever. And I think the film is excellent, actually, most of the way through. Really good performances, well directed, as I say, and these kind of very good, horror demons like the barbarians, I guess. I'm not sure what they're called, actually, but they're done very well as well. There's only one place Barbarian can go, and it's a strong start to this tier list. It's going straight into the Land of Milk and Honey. Next up, we have Hellhole, a film which I just found this kind of strange, and I found it very, very slow. And that was the biggest problem with this film, is it was just too slow for me, and it never really reached a point that I found myself really involved with the film. The performances were okay here. This film was about an undercover policeman who is in disguise as a priest investigating a Polish monastery in 1987. And he's investigating the disappearances of some missing women, I believe. Things go from bad to worse for him as he discovers more about the goings on in this monastery. And there's a pretty explosive ending, actually, which is quite good, but it is kind of out of sync with how the rest of the film feels and the rest of the narrative for me. So Hellhole wasn't all that good to me, and I'm being strict here with putting at least one film into every tier. For me, therefore, Hellhole, I'm going to put into a Heffalump. Sorry, Hellhole. This was directed by Bartosz Kowalski, if anyone's interested, and it was from 2020. Next up, so all these films are pretty recent films, actually, this time. Usually I have 1 or 2 that are quite old films, but all of these are recent, so I'm keeping up with the times. Next up, we've got Infinity Pool. Infinity Pool is personally one of the films I enjoyed the most on this list. It was absolutely nuts. It was completely off the wall, this film, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Mia Goth is fantastic, as she usually is in films I've seen her in recently, certainly. Alexander Skarsgård is great as James in this film. So what is this film all about? Well, this is a very strange film. So this is a couple that go to this strange kind of exotic location, And the longer they stay there, the more strange it gets, particularly for the character James, who is meets with this other woman who is very interested in, seems very interested in his in this book he wrote. Things just get very weird. And there's an interesting concept in this film where if you commit a crime, the way you pay for that crime is by having a body double created of yourself, basically a clone, I think. And the clone is punished. So in this case, the clone is killed. And it's done in front of Alexander Skarsgård's character. And it is so messed up, like really weird. And the film gets stranger and stranger and stranger, but it's so absorbing because it's well acted. It's got some really interesting, just strange moments in it, but they're, interesting effects and visuals. Visually, I really like this film, actually. I think, reminded me a little bit of 2013's Under the Skin, just in the way it was kind of disturbing and sci-fi horror at the same time. Man, I just loved it. But I can't put it into S tier because I just think the film was, I thought it could have made more with the clone concept, actually. And a lot of people find this film super weird. It is very chaotic and not all that linear always either. I think it's not quite S tier, but maybe the film out of all of these, maybe the one I enjoyed the most. But anyway, let's move on to number 4. The fourth film on the list is Nope, Jordan Peele's film. Really, really interesting sci-fi horror film, or sort of neo-Western sci-fi horror, I think it gets called. And again, this is a really interesting, slightly crazy film. For me, the one issue I had with this film was it had a very slow build-up. But once it gets about halfway through, things get interesting. When the UFO comes into the mix, for me, that's where the film starts to really get interesting. And there is a very disturbing scene in this film, actually, that, I thought was, for me, the highlight of the film almost. I did enjoy, the way they dealt with the UFO towards the end. I won't go into too much detail to avoid major spoilers, but I like the way all that was dealt with and the ideas behind the technological aspects of this film, the way the sci-fi elements are introduced as well. But for me, the point of the film I may always remember was this really odd, slightly, claustrophobic, really disturbing scene where you've got these people kind of, I don't want to give too much away, but it, for me, very, very good film. Again, a weird one, but a very good weird. I'm all for weird. I'm absolutely all for weird. In fact, I tend to prefer weird stuff to most normal stuff these days. So normal, Nope, rather, it's certainly not normal. It's Going into Tigger Energy, another very, very good film for me. Next up, we have Pearl, directed by Ti West, the sort of prequel to X, a film I have also put into a tier list before. Go watch that if you're interested in where I put X in a previous tier list video. So Pearl, I don't need to talk about this one too much. I did a short video actually on what I thought of it and how good I thought it was and how stellar I thought Mia Goth was as the lead in this film as Pearl. Just a very good development of characters in this film as well. And I thought the relationship between Pearl and her mother was absolutely fascinating to watch. And there's good kills in this film if you like your kills. Generally, just an excellent film. So Pearl is joining Barbarian in the land of milk and honey. Next up, we have Run from 2020, I believe this film was. This is a film directed by Anish Chaganty. Stars Sarah Paulson and Kira Allen. Very good film. The thing is, though, for some reason, I found it a little bit difficult to sort of really... I didn't get much enjoyment out of the film. I think it was so serious, really. It was very serious tone. It was very intense. But I struggled a little bit with it. I thought the acting was fantastic. I mean, Sarah Paulson and Kira Allen were phenomenal. And their performances, I can't fault those at all whatsoever. It's a good psychological thriller. But for me, because I'm being typically, I've got to be strict and nitpicky. It just wasn't really for me so much. So I'm just going to put Run into Blustery Day. But you may have loved this film, and you will probably be justified in that. But for me, it just was. I found it so serious. I didn't really enjoy it quite as much as some of these other movies. So it's just going here for me into the middle tier. But I certainly respected it as a well-directed, well-acted movie. Pretty good stuff on that side of things. Unwelcome. So Unwelcome. Oh dear, this film is a total train wreck. It's a complete train wreck of a movie. I would like to be kinder, but I'd struggle to be kind with Unwelcome. So the thing with Unwelcome is that it has its kind of tropes for a start, but the biggest problem with this film is it tries to be at one moment very serious and then at the next moment super goofy and over the top. And you have a lot of silly characters that kind of undermine some of the more intended darker tones, I think, of this film. The acting's not very good either, in all honesty. Actually, I thought the actress that plays Maya was quite good, Hannah John Kamen, but everyone else was kind of not very. This was kind of terrible. So Unwelcome is indeed rather unwelcome, it seems, on this tier list. It's going into It's Just Pooh. Next up, we have Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. Now, this film I have seen, my goodness, I've seen so many YouTubers absolutely slate this, and I try not to watch reviews too much before I see something or before I listen to albums. I try to avoid, I know that sounds odd as a reviewer myself, but for Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, I thought, I'm just going to see it myself. I'm just going to make my own judgment on this film. But unfortunately, I have to agree with most people that I've seen criticize and generally lambast and condemn this movie. It's not a very good film, basically. It's like a cheap 80s slasher. It reminds me a little bit of the style of the kind of Friday the 13th sequels. You know, it's kind of cheap, kind of tacky. The quality of the editing is not very good. The story starts off okay. I actually thought the starting film, this kind of title sequence bit almost, where they have the black and white cartoon animation explaining, you know, the background to Christopher Robin abandoning Piglet and Pooh, was actually kind of good. But the film fell off there very quickly as it focused in more on these young women and how Pooh and Piglet were basically gonna, you know, kill and maim these young women. And it's interesting, really. I never thought I would see A.A. Milne's Winnie the Pooh as a psychopathic pervert. I never thought I'd see the day, but I've now seen it. But anyway, this isn't a great film at all. Winnie the Pooh is going into It's Just Pooh. And it is. It is Pooh, and it's just Pooh. And I've said Pooh enough times. Next up, we have You Are Not My Mother, the dark horse in this collection of films. This is a real dark horse. I say it's a dark horse because I went in with low expectations. I had no idea really what I was going to get, to be honest. It was a Netflix film, and there are a lot of trashy horror films on Netflix. So I thought, well, this was probably going to be one that's going to end up maybe in the lower tiers. And I tell you, I'm wrong. This was actually, I was wrong rather. This is a decent film. This is a good film, I think. So this one was directed by I got this right. Nicola Dolan, no, Kate Dolan, sorry, Kate Dolan, stars Hazel Dupe. And this is a little like the film Run, in that you have a daughter discovering more and more about her mother as the film goes on, or seemingly her mother, right? And it just gets really interesting. But the thing I loved about this film particularly was the cinematography. There's some beautiful kind of landscape shots of this kind of town, I think in North Dublin or in Dublin somewhere. And it's just really beautifully shot. And I think that the acting was actually quite good for the most part. I enjoyed the way that there was a resolution in this film as well with what happened towards the end. I quite liked that, although I could sort of see it coming. I just thought it was all executed pretty well. And this is the dark horse in the list. So this dark horse disc, I call it dark horse disc, this dark horse film is going into Tiger Energy. I recommend it, actually. I think, you know, if you've got Netflix and you want to watch a film that's you know, pretty good, pretty decent. And it's not a long film either, and you want to see something different from any of these other films maybe on the list, I would recommend You Are Not My Mother. So that's it from me. That's the end of the tier list. Do let me know how you'd rate these films, or which films you like the most out of this collection, which ones you liked the least. I'd love to hear from you. Did you love Winnie the Pooh, Blumhoney? Did you not like Pearl? Do you have very different opinions from me, basically, on these films? Or do you agree? Just let me know, what were your favourite scenes in some of these films? Anything like that. Otherwise, I'm going to shut up now. And until next time, everybody, have great weekends. And from me, bye for now.